I'm Adrian Summers. I'm a wealth manager with Barclays, and I guess I'm the end game position for many of you that are perhaps building your business as we speak, with a view to selling it at some point in the future. For most of you, that will be a life-changing event for all entrepreneurs. The ideal is that they build their business, they grow it to a certain size, and then they have a sale event, and at that point in time, there's typically a large realization of cash. So the risk that you've taken through growing that business and building it to a point where it's of a good size and there's actually significant value in making that sale, that's the point at which you'll probably be looking to enjoy the fruits of your labor and possibly retire on that. Clearly, there'll be some serial entrepreneurs out there that want to reinvest that money back into another business or start a new venture up. There'll be those of you that perhaps think, right, well, I've taken enough risk now. I've made my wealth, and I'm going to sit back and enjoy that. And then there'll be a mixture of perhaps some reinvestment and obviously taking the risk off the table from running a business and a new startup. This is where you probably look to take some advice from a wealth manager. So once you've had that realization event, what do you do with your money? How do you plan for the future? What kind of things do you need to take account of? And a good wealth manager will help you point in the right direction of all those things that perhaps hadn't been on the table pre this sale. First and foremost, where we give most of our advice to clients is around the tax planning and structuring element of it. So things that you may not have thought of or done much with. So it's looking at things like your pensions. Have you been saving into ISAs? Perhaps using offshore bonds, making sure that the tax structuring of the wealth that you've created is in the right place and able to deliver all of your financial objectives and help you enjoy that retirement that you've now moved into. What the good wealth manager will do is look at what your overall goals are, what your current situation is, and be able to advise you on the best structures and the best planning around that to make use of all of the allowances that the government give us to reduce your overall tax liability and make that money last as long as possible, and so that you enjoy it and hopefully continue to enjoy your retirement. The next piece, and probably the most complicated part of all of this, is around the actual investment advice. So prior to this point, there may not have been a huge amount of cash available to do any investments. It may not be something that you're experienced with or feel comfortable having a conversation from. And certainly from the point of view of sale events with such a large amount of money, clearly most people don't feel that comfortable with going off and trying to manage that themselves. So they employ somebody to take on that responsibility. I'm sure you're all aware that cash is incredibly poor at the moment. So in terms of surviving your retirement, just leaving all of that money that you've generated in cash would just give you a finite amount of time over which that would be eroded as you cover your income. Most people obviously want to keep ahead of inflation and keep the real value of their money the same, and therefore you're looking for seeking better returns and need to take some advice on how to invest that money and look after it on an ongoing basis. Most of what we do in that arena is risk mitigation and diversification. So whilst anybody could open an investment platform, and there's lots of them out there, and select some funds or individual shares to buy, it's how do all of those create diversification of risk across the piece, and how do they move together? And that's something that a wealth manager will help you with and talk you through that to build something that's aligned to your own risk appetite and making sure that you're comfortable with the kind of risks you're taking and the volatility that's within those investments. And then longer term, clearly, if the sale of the business is of a significant size, and you may well have children at that point and other people to think about, a lot of what we do is around that intergenerational succession planning. So looking at how do you pass that wealth on to future generations? How do we protect some of that wealth that you've generated from inheritance tax? Now, at the moment in the UK, inheritance tax sits at 40% of your estate, and that's a significant amount to give up that you could potentially pass on to your children or other relatives with some good advice around the planning. So it's an area where we can help give advice and look on that. There's lots of elements. You're going to hear from lots of people on the panel today in terms of who the main protagonists are within a business exit, and everybody relevant, everybody has a part to play at different stages within that sale. What Barclays has created, and what I'm just going to bring up on my screen, is basically a is that showing up? There we go. Hopefully everybody can see that now. It should be coming through. We've created a brochure, which is a pre-exit planning for entrepreneurs brochure, and it talks you through the different stages of actually exiting a business. So very generic, very helpful in terms of a guide, giving you some timelines around when you need to engage with people and the kind of people that you need to engage with, all of which are on this panel today. So more than happy to pick up with people afterwards. I believe Leon's going to send this this document out to everybody that's attended this afternoon, so you can have a read of it yourself. But we'll be there in the networking event afterwards to pick up on anything. But I think Cathal is now back on the line, so I will happily hand back over to him to talk about financing of a business exit.
Thanks, Adrian. Apologies, I'm not sure why I got cut off there, but I think it was when I attempted to share my screen. So for now, I won't do that. On the basis I'm not sure when I got cut off, I'll start again, but I'll be brief. I work in a specialist finance team within Barclays, whose remit is to assist our business clients turning over typically between 1 and 6 or 7 million. We assist them with acquisitions and management buyouts. It's the latter of the two, I guess, that is applicable here, and I'll discuss and focus on. So there are different reasons for wanting to exit your business, either partially or wholly, and we can assist with both. The typical solutions for customers to do that will be through a specialist existing solution, specialist debtor book leverage, so invoice discounting or confidential invoice discounting, vendor finance or an earnout. And then maybe some government-backed schemes like the Enterprise Finance Guarantee. Where we differ, we're a term debt proposition where we look to finance over a relatively short term, typically 3 to 5 years. We look to finance the partial or whole exit of a business by its owners or owners. We can work alongside some of those existing options. For instance, we're typically our financing to be one consideration that works alongside vendor financing in the form of a loan note, and we can work alongside CID or invoice discounting lines as well, although it's perhaps a little bit more restrictive when you both forms of debt funding. In terms of our metrics, the key financial that we focus on, I guess, therefore they're not radically different than the other lenders out there, what they're looking at. We would do up to 2.5 times leverage, so 2.5 times the EBITDA of the business. We would typically do 3 to 5 year term. We have a minimum profit criteria that won't be the same across every bank. For every bank runner, for us it's $500,000 on a 2 or 3 year trended basis. But it is safe to say that the strength of the EBITDA and the consistency of an EBITDA will be the focus of any financier looking at potentially helping a business with a management buyout. From a transactional gearing point of view, we typically fund about 50% of the deal value, or perhaps in this instance, the actual business value. Any of these loans, like any standard loan, but I get more so in these sort of loans because the fundamental difference is they're unsecured. The primary security for us will be a first-ranking debenture. We're going to covenant these loans, so we typically covenant them on a debt service basis at, on average, 1.5 times cover, sometimes 1.25, but sometimes 1.75, and that will be driven by a number of variables. But again, that's across the market, any lenders putting this loan in place, it's going to put in covenants associated with it, debt service, a leverage covenant, and perhaps some other more specific and more bespoke covenants tailored to the deal itself. As I previously mentioned, these what makes this our proposition and in general for these sort of transactions in the market distinct is they're unsecured. They're not typically asset backed, although they can be if there is assets in the business to help fund the transaction. The primary security will be, as I mentioned, a first ranking debenture. We as it happens also look for a nominal personal guarantee, not a form of security, really more of a lever in the event of distress scenario or default scenario. But that is not typical of the market. Most other lenders don't necessarily look for that as a default position. We typically do for those reasons. The other element of our proposition, and again, is a feature of most of these deals, that the financiers probably will look for some external financial due diligence to be done on the deal. And given these deals can often be typically a little bit more complex than a standard SME lend, there will also be an element of legal due diligence involved in the cases as well. And that's primarily our approach across all those metrics. What is key is like with all these deals, it's the strength of performance and the strength of the incumbent management team, the team you're bringing in to take over from the existing owners, their track record, their experience, their existing involvement in the business, all very key considerations tied to other considerations like the recurring nature of the revenue streams, the client, if there's an element of client concentration over reliance on one or a small number of clients or suppliers. These are increasingly, they're important with any debt deal, but very important on a cash flow level. And that's it for me.